So, welcome everybody to the UKOT's Territories Conservation Forum hosted Rufford Foundation Small Grants event. Thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to start by giving a huge thank you to the Rufford Foundation and for Joe in particular for being here today and giving you your time to talk about the Small Grants Programme and how it can help UKOT's Territories Conservation. Of course, Joe will be talking specifically about the Rufford Foundation, but her advice will be useful for other funding programmes for sure. So I think, yeah, whatever comes from today, hopefully we can inspire and motivate people to apply for Rufford for some funding. Yeah, today it's just like to learn, understand a bit more, and yeah, we invite you to ask questions at the end during the Q&A. But Joe's also very kindly said if you, as it's such a sort of small informal meeting, you'll be welcome to kind of sort of ask any questions that she's going through as well if you would like to. So Jo started her career at ZSL, where she gained over 20 years' experience in both ex situ and in situ conservation, with a particular focus on tigers and amur leopards. Her expertise spans fieldwork, species management, and strategic conservation planning. After 5 years of teaching and furthering her education, this provided Jo with the opportunity to inspire the next generation of conservationists. Jo's role as the grants officer at the Rufford Foundation enables her to support and empower young people in the field, and she continues to champion innovative approaches to wildlife conservation and education. So, Jo, if you're happy, I will hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you again for being here.
That's great. Thank you, Jodie, and thank you everyone for attending today. We appreciate you giving up your time to listen to me speak about Rufford. I normally talk for 30 to 40 minutes. It does depend on how many tangents I go off on, but you can just reel me back in as I come on focus if needed. Okay, so the idea today is to tell you about our small grants programme and sort of go through the application process. Now, it might not be relevant to some of you as individuals, but I'm sure you have contacts or people working within your teams where it would be relevant. So hopefully you can all get something from this. So the Rufford Foundation is a UK registered charity. It's had many different focuses in the past, but we do now focus on our small grants programme and our conservation work. And the intention is to support early career conservationists around the world. And over the past 20 years, we've been able to give more than £30 million to over 6,500 grants in over 150 countries. So just a few numbers there for you. We're currently giving out about 300 grants per year, which equates to about £2 million. So in terms of the number of grants, you know, we're definitely one of the highest out of any of the conservation funders. We are a small team, even though we're doing a lot. Our office is based in London. And at the moment, there are 6 of us. There should be 7. So hopefully we'll be back up to full strength in the near future. But I think it's nice to put sort of faces to names and know that we're not just this abstract entity. We are real people who really want to help. So our CEO is Stuart and our grants manager is Simon. And they both have long backgrounds with fauna and flora. Stuart is also with CLP. Myself as the grants officer. We've got a fairly new role in our monitoring, evaluating and learning officer. So that's being done by Emma, who is also at Fauna and Flora. And this sounds terrible. It's like we're poaching everyone from the same organisation, but we're not, I promise. It's just coincidence. We have Jane, who is our trust administrator. And if you are ever involved in a Rufford application, it is Jane that you're going to hear from most. She basically keeps the whole machine well oiled and running and does a lot of the hard work for us. We've then got Monica, who is our communications officer, and we are recruiting for a finance officer. And at the moment, Monica is having to do both roles, so she's desperate to get the new finance officer in. So yeah, just a small team, but it's very much, it sounds corny, but it is very much sort of a family feel about it. And having stemmed from a family foundation, it's quite nice that we still have that ethos and atmosphere at the foundation. So a bit about our programme and where we fund and the projects, etc. I've just pulled this map off our website, and essentially we fund projects in countries that are not listed as advanced economies by the IMF. Now, as always, there are some exceptions to that, and you can find that information on our website. There are some countries we've had to exclude for political reasons, as I'm sure you appreciate. But because of that, historically, UCOTs have been kind of not included in where we can fund. But we were well aware that this is an issue, and it was something we'd been discussing within the office and for other countries, overseas territories as well. So we're really pleased that Jodie reached out just to explore options, and we will absolutely consider applications from UCOTs now as well, and consider each one on a case-by-case basis, which is great. You can see that there are some hotspots, so the darker shade indicates a higher number of grants, and we are trying to sort of increase and sort of equalise that reach. We'd love to get some more projects in the Caribbean region coming through, also sort of Pacific Island area as well. But you can see we've got quite a lot happening across the world. We did not have a particular taxonomic focus. So, your passion might be fungi, it might be mammals, could be invertebrates, whatever. We will consider any taxonomic group, but they do have to be not listed as least concern on the IUCN Red List. So I'll go into that a little bit later on. It also doesn't have to have a taxonomic focus. Your project might be focusing on a theme, or it might be focusing on a particular landscape or ecosystem. It won't surprise you to know that the majority of our projects are focused on mammals, and that is the majority of the applications we've got coming through. So, we're trying to do as much as we can, but we still need people to want to work with the less represented things as well. So at the moment, there are 4 stages to our grant programme. It has been recently, sort of within the past couple of years, reduced down from 5. So if you're looking at historical projects, you might notice some people have received 5 grants and are querying why you can only get 4. It was reduced down to 4, but each one was worth slightly more. So we've decided that's a better way to manage things for us. The first stage that you're allowed to apply for is worth up to £7,000. The second stage is worth up to £8,000. Your booster grant is worth up to £12,000. And the completion grant, which is the final one, is worth up to £18,000. So in total, you could, in theory, be awarded up to £45,000. Now, every funding stage does have its own criteria. And of course, there's no guarantees that just because you've received a first grant, you will then get your second grant. We still review it in exactly the same way. But if you're doing good stuff, then there's every chance that you would get subsequent grants. We do like to see people building on the work that they've achieved in previous grants. The whole idea is that you get to expand, bring in wider networks, try and achieve more for your ultimate focus. But we also appreciate that some people want to change their focus after the first grant, particularly if they are a master's or a PhD student. When they get their first grant, they might decide, actually, do you know what, this one's not for me. Or they might learn something through that process and it means they're going off in a different direction. So we will allow a change of focus between the first and the second grants, but after that, everything does need to follow on. And of course, I should put this one on every slide. You must submit reports on time. That's probably the one thing we really, really want. Please send in your reports. Up until now, we've only requested a final evaluation report, but we have brought in, or we are just about to bring in, a request for interim reports as well. So that is a slight change moving forward. Now, our applications are always open. We don't have a window at all, so you can apply at any point during the year. And all applications for all the different stage grants are through our online portal, so you can just go onto the Rufford website and click on that apply button to start the process. And we've put as much information up as we possibly can to try and make the process painless, and to try and give you every chance of being successful in your application. So if you or someone you know is going to apply for a Rufford grant, please just read everything. Every time there's a little blue hyperlink, read it. Read all the frequently asked questions, just everything, please, because that will really help you, and it helps us as well in processing your application quicker. So yeah, we've just got lots of information, as you can see over there. So we've got help section, frequently asked questions, country eligibility, etc. So just read it all. Okay, so the first thing is obviously to make sure that you are eligible. So I've said that you need to be in the early stage with your conservation career. And the majority of our first stage grants do go to masters or PhD students, or those that have graduated in the past 3 years. Now, we do appreciate that in some countries, access to higher education is quite limited. and it can be quite difficult to access. So we will consider people that aren't sort of within that sort of criteria. That is fine. Obviously, it makes it a bit harder because we need to know that you're capable of carrying out the work and you've got the support to sort of see you through it. But we will consider other options as well. So eligible country, as I've said, the majority of our first and second stage grants are for small scale or for pilot projects. They must have a nature conservation focus. So we don't really like to see pure research projects, but we do appreciate that sometimes you might need to gather some baseline data in order to then progress and sort of bring in the conservation aspect. So as long as you can show the application of that research, then it might be okay for that first and potentially even the second stage grants. And as I said, if you're focusing on the taxonomic group, it cannot be least concern on the IUCN Red List. But there's another caveat. If you can show that that particular species or subspecies in that particular area is under real sort of threat from a conservation perspective, then we will consider it. So just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about a project we've recently approved in Trinidad on ocelot. So ocelot, at least concern. However, in Trinidad, they are the apex predator. So obviously it's a very different situation. They are threatened there. If they were lost, there'd be very different sort of repercussions than perhaps in the rest of their range. So yeah, we will consider it, but you will need to show us the reasons why you think that species needs more attention than something that's not listed as least concern. Or as I said, you can think about focusing on a particular theme like illegal wildlife trade, human-wildlife coexistence, or something like that. So at this point, I'm just going to go through some of the sections of the application form so I can explain why we ask certain things and sort of highlight the areas where people sort of fall down a little bit. And again, this probably would be relevant for a lot of other funders as well. So very simple things such as the name. We do prefer it if people use their official name on the application, because at some point we need to make sure we're giving the money to the right person. So whatever is on, the passport or official ID, we need to make sure it's the right person. I've highlighted email there, and that's because we link applications by the email address. So if you've already received a first grant and you're applying for a second one, it's by you inputting the same email address that the two get linked together. So for that reason, I do recommend that people do not use an institutional email address, particularly if they are a master's student, for example, because at some point that email is going to be redundant. So using a personal email address is sometimes better. And then social media. So people ask, why do we want to see your social media? Again, this is really just to make sure that you're a real life person. It's not just that I want to look at your holiday snaps. I really don't, I promise you. But we just want to see, you do exist. I do look to see that some of your posts are relevant to what you're doing. That does help us. But I recommend that you provide the link for something like LinkedIn or ResearchGate rather than TikTok, which I don't use TikTok. I'm not the right age to use TikTok. So definitely LinkedIn, ResearchGate are preferred. Facebook is fine. And I do also ask that you give the actual link for your account, not just your name, because if I was going to search for Joe Cook on Facebook, I will find lots of Joe Cooks and it would be difficult for me to pick out the right one. Okay, so make your life easier for me. We do ask for your education background, just to see if you do, what level you have worked at and if they are relevant degrees as well. We ask for employment history. Again, this is mainly for relevant employment history. So it's great if you, supported yourself through uni by working at McDonald's, but actually I just want to know what's relevant for the application. And if you don't have any relevant employment, that's okay. That's not going to go against you. The personal plans for the future is quite an important one for us because Rufford is really about funding the person as opposed to the project. Obviously, the project has to be good, but we're trying to identify those key conservationists. So we'd like to know a bit about you, what you're hoping to do moving forward. Now, sadly, we don't actually get the chance to meet most of our grantees. So this is just a way for us to try and get to know who you might be. And then there's a section asking about whether you've attended a Rufford conference. Now, if you are our first stage applicant, then you won't have done, but moving forward, you might have been. And if I see that you've attended a conference that I wasn't at, I could say to other people within the team, "Oh, you were at this conference. Do you remember meeting so and so?" And then hopefully they'll say, "Oh, yes, they were brilliant. We want to fund them again," rather than, "Yeah." So don't worry too much if you haven't been to one. Okay, so the important stuff, the project information. Obviously, we need to know where the project is happening. Be as specific as you can. Some people like to give us coordinates for certain sites, which is great. I'm never going to object to that level of detail. But if you're talking about communities, for example, give the names of those communities. Okay, we really want to know exactly where you are. Obviously, the start and end dates are quite important. Majority of our projects are about 12 months, sometimes up to 18 months. And then for the booster and the completion projects, because they tend to be on a larger scale, they might go up to 2 years, perhaps even a little longer. But majority of our projects are running for about 12 months. You're going to give the background to your project. So, what is the question that you've identified that needs answering? What are the threats to your particular species, or what are the issues you're trying to address? And then also give us that information about why that particular site is important and why that species and why you should be the one doing the proposed work. We do ask you to link any focal species in this section, so you can actually link directly to the IUCN Red List website. I do suggest that if it's involving a number of species, you might have, I don't know, 75 different species in one patch of woodland, for example. Please don't list all 75. Maybe pick out 5 or 6, and definitely pick out those that are the most threatened to highlight the importance of that work. If it's only one species, that's absolutely fine as well. If you are trying to indicate that actually your species is more highly threatened in the area you're working, then provide a link to a national red list if you can, or some other sort of peer-reviewed publication to show that this isn't just word of mouth. There's definitely a high risk to that particular species. Okay, now the expected outcomes section. I think this is where people struggle a little bit, particularly if they're not experienced at writing funding applications. So before you go through this process, it's definitely worth having a really good theory of change in your mind, at least. Think about exactly what it is you're hoping to achieve and identify those activities that will help you to achieve that. Sometimes people are really ambitious and they'll think about every single thing that's impacting a particular area. And there's no way, with the best will on earth, that they're going to be able to achieve doing something for all of that. Okay, so don't be too ambitious. Sometimes that backfires on you. It's good to be aware of everything, but be realistic about what you can achieve. So I would definitely say, look to have between 3 and 5 key outcomes. 3 is completely standard for a first grant. That's absolutely fine. And make sure that the activities you're going to list for each outcome really will help you achieve it. Okay, and you also want to make sure that your indicators make sense. So the indicators have to be true indicators of the activities that you're proposing in order to reach that outcome. We like the indicators to be smart where possible. So rather than just saying, "Oh, I'd like to see a reduction in reports of human-wildlife conflict," that's great. But if it's just 1 less a year, that's a reduction. Does that mean you've actually achieved something? Okay, so really think about, a 20% decline or something like that. And as I say, be realistic about what you can actually see within the project period. So if you're trying to promote an alternative livelihood, it's unlikely you're going to see the results of that within a 12-month period. If you're trying to have an area with, protected designation, that's not going to happen within 12 months. So really think carefully about what you can realistically achieve. And if needed, sort of add in somewhere about longer term monitoring so you can truly evaluate what you have done. So we ask you to think about the key stakeholders that will be involved in your project. For us, it's a bit of a sort of an alarm bell starts ringing if we only see universities listed here or sort of NGOs. We really want to see the whole breadth of key stakeholders because, there's always going to be at least 4 or 5 different groups involved. So whether that's communities, universities, NGOs, religious groups, etc., definitely try and identify them prior to your work. And if you can show that you've already had some preliminary discussions with them or some links, that is really good to see as well. We ask for methods to be provided for each of the activities that you've mentioned in the section before. Definitely reference those if you can. And I do recommend that you use the Conservation Evidence website as well, just to see if those methods have been used elsewhere on similar species, etc. And that's to try and prevent you doing something that's not going to work. You know, it might be it's been tried somewhere else and it wasn't great, so it needs to be tweaked. But definitely make sure that you're choosing appropriate methods. The result sharing again is really key, and we want to make sure that you're thinking about each stakeholder group and what's appropriate for them. Now, the vast majority of our projects, people want to have peer reviewed publications come from them, which is great. Never going to knock that. You know, we really recommend that they approach sort of open access publications like Oryx. However, we know that publishing isn't great for the local community that's been involved. So think about, you know, community meetings or social media, all those different ways that you can actually share your results and have some output from them. And then sustainability. Again, this is more important for our later stage grants, particularly the booster and the completion ones. But thinking about how that project will carry on having an impact into the future, you know, what sort of succession planning have you got? In the first stage grant is not so important, but we'd still like you to have thought about what you can do moving forward and how the impact can be maintained over time. There was something that came into my head then and it's gone straight out again. Hopefully it will come back to me. Okay, we also ask for details of the team members that are going to be involved in your project. Again, sometimes people will only put down their academic supervisor, but we want to see, you know, who else you are actually engaging with, who's going to be doing the work with you. We really want to see as many local people involved as possible, be that students, community leaders, or whoever else is appropriate. And we ask that you provide information on the skills and expertise that they have, but also specifically what they will be doing within the project. So we can just see how the workload is going to be split up and make sure that actually you have people with the correct expertise. So, for example, a lot of our projects will involve habitat restoration, but there's no one within the team who has that obvious skills in, you know, establishing nurseries and planting out seedlings, etc. Or a lot of our projects have got sort of a social component to it, but there's no one within the team that has those evident skills in the social sciences. It might be you don't know specifically who's going to be within your team. So if, for example, you're going to employ a local field guide or a driver, you're not going to know their name at this stage, which is fine, but still include, you know, local driver within the team, because when you come to the budget, there's going to be a cost attached to that, and we need to make sure it's all sort of consistent. And we can see why, for example, you might need per diems for 6 people, whereas you've only named 4, for example, within your team. So for the budget, this is something that does give me a bit of a headache, and I will mutter under my breath every day because of someone's budget. We like to see too much detail, if anything. Okay, it's very frustrating if someone doesn't actually tell us what specifically the money's going to go on. Now, everyone is aware that when you're applying for funding, before you do the application, you're going to work out roughly in your head or on the back of an envelope, oh yeah, I'll need about £1,500 for this, I'll need about £800 for this. But we need to see that you've actually costed it properly and you're using real life costs to come up with the budget that you are going to submit to us. And I think people are a little bit reluctant to do that because they're worried about exchange rates, for example, and they know that when it comes to the end of the project, the budgets aren't going to quite match up. That's absolutely fine. We appreciate that that happens, but we do want to see real costs used during the application. We do allow overheads, but they can be no more than 10%, so please take that on board. And if you do have co-funding, please include that too. I've just noticed there's something on the chat there, so I'm just going to have a quick look to see if there's questions. Oh, okay. All right, I can ignore that. Yeah, please include co-funding. We don't normally see that for a first or a second grant. We like to see it for a booster grant, and we do insist upon it for a completion grant. So when you get to those later stages, we'd like to see up to 50% co-funding. And that's because we're hoping at that stage, you've developed greater networks, you're taking on more, so you need larger amounts of money to do the activities, etc. But yeah, for your first and second stage grants, it's not something to be too worried about. In terms of actually receiving the funds, you do need to have either an NGO or a university ready to receive the funds on your behalf. And that's because we will not send to a personal bank account, and that's purely an anti-fraud measure. So definitely think about who can manage those funds on your behalf before you apply. Okay, so for the application, we do of course want references for every application, and we actually request 3. So one of those references should be from within the country where you're working. If you are a current student, a reference has to be from your current academic supervisor. And then the third reference has to be an international reference. And that's just, again, to make sure that we've got enough information about you. The person has to know you. Okay, it's no good that they know the team that you're working with or the NGO you're working with. They do need to know you as a person. And we actually hold quite a lot of store by these references because, this is the best snapshot we've got, or a bit of an insight into you as a person. Please contact your references in advance and make sure that you have permission to put their name down. It's okay for you to share information about your project with your referees. Of course, they need to know what it is you're planning so that they can actually comment on your work. But do not be tempted to write the reference for them just to tweak and send in. We will reject people, and we have done fairly often, unfortunately, where we see the same reference has been used by 3 people, but just changed ever so slightly, or in some cases not changed at all. So make sure they are authentic. Once you have submitted your application form, if we do not receive your references within 12 weeks of that submission, then unfortunately your application gets rejected automatically. And that's such a frustration. It's frustrating for you, it's frustrating for us. But also, which is even worse, you would not be able to reapply for 12 months after that happens. So, if you know that your referee is likely to end up going off on a field trip, within that 12-week period, just make sure they're going to send in your reference before they disappear. So you stand a better chance of getting through. Okay, so you have submitted your application and your references have been received. So at that point, the application comes to me and I'll do the first review, which is really looking at the eligibility of the project. So looking at who you are, what the project entails, where it is, etc. I will also give it a very quick sort of technical review, but very super quick, just to make sure that you're not trying to achieve the world, or, there is at least some sort of good quality within that. Sometimes at this point, it's obvious that it doesn't quite match our eligibility requirements. And if that's the case, I would recommend that we reject it. And it goes then to Stuart, our CEO, and he'll look at my comments, he'll look at the application, and usually agrees, and we will reject it at that point. Sometimes I might think, okay, this is a good application, it has merit, but the budget isn't up to scratch. So I will then contact the applicant through Jane and give them the opportunity to send through a better budget. Or it might be that we need an additional reference because we don't have an international one or something. And again, I would give them the opportunity to do that. I'm all about trying to give as many chances as possible. So once I've got enough information and I think that it's okay to put through to our external reviewers, it does go through to them. And our external reviewers are at Fauna and Flora, and the applications get matched up with people with the right set of skills and expertise. So maybe they've worked with that species or they're familiar with that country. So we try and get that real good sort of expertise insight. 2 people will review the application. And they'll come back with the judgment of yes, no, maybe yes, maybe no, if they're not quite sure. If those 2 reviewers are kind of diametrically opposed, so one says yes to funding and one says no, we would then have a third Fauna and Flora reviewer. That all comes back to Simon. He'll look at the reviews, and quite often the reviewers ask for some additional questions. So perhaps they need something elaborating on, or there was something missing. He will then go back to the applicant with those extra questions. Hopefully the applicant then replies with some good answers to that. And then Simon will make the recommendation to Stuart as to whether we should fund or not. So it is really sort of extensive process, and that's because we want to make sure that we are funding the right people. And it means that every application has a minimum of 2 people reviewing it, and it can be up to 6, even 7 sometimes if we want to pull in other expertise as well. Now, because of this, it does take a bit of time to go through that whole process, and depending on how busy, particularly fauna and flora are at the time, it can take around 4 months. I'd say 3 months is probably average. We're able to turn around the booster and the completion grant applications a bit quicker because we are just doing that in-house now. But you definitely need to plan ahead and allow for quite a few months sort of turnover in terms of planning your work. So this past week, I've been getting really stressed because people have sent in applications in December for work to start in January. I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. So definitely build that into your planning. And then, as I said, if rejected, you do unfortunately need to wait 12 months to reapply. Hopefully, though, you'll be successful, in which case, congratulations. You will receive notification of success, and then you'll be asked to complete a banking information form. So, as I've already said, the funds are typically sent to an NGO or university. If it's going somewhere where we have not sent money before, then we would need to do a verbal banking verification check. So that would be Monica or our new person calling up and just again, cross-checking account details, etc. to stop fraud. Unfortunately, one of our grantees recently, his emails were hacked. And we very nearly lost the money going to the wrong person, but it was because Monica saw that the account numbers were slightly different, that we were able to say, hold on a minute, there's something wrong here. And we were able to prevent that happening. But hackers are definitely getting a lot cleverer, and it's getting harder and harder to stop. So yeah, we do need to obviously be as careful as we can be in sending the funds. So during the project, people really panic and they worry if things start going wrong, and it's fine generally. Definitely not worth panicking. Every conservation project, there will be unexpected events, which might need you to change your approach. And actually, being flexible and adaptable is a really important skill for a conservationist to have. What we do want, though, is good communication. We want to know if something's gone wrong, not so that we can berate you, but so that we can support you and actually sort of discuss options for moving forward. And actually, within that final evaluation report, we do ask grantees to highlight where things didn't go to plan and what actions they took. And, very often they learnt more from that aspect than they did from when everything went smoothly and went right. If you need to change your budget allocation for some reason, obviously if it's a small change, then it's okay. If it's anything more than 10%, I think we're asking just to be notified beforehand, because we don't want to see during that final report that suddenly, you spent double the amount of money on workshops or equipment than we were expecting. So essentially communication is key. So if you are successful, you do get to have your own page on the Rufford Foundation website. And it's a really good idea to have a look here before you even do your application, just to see which projects we funded on the same species or in the same area, just to give you a bit of an overview about what's already been done. These pages are written by the grantees themselves, so this is your words. You're highlighting to everyone what it is that you've done. We add the project reports here as well and any updates. Obviously, we will remove sensitive information if you need us to. That's absolutely fine. We can do redacted versions, but it's quite nice to actually see your work highlighted on the Rufford website. And we're really trying to encourage people to move through that whole sort of grant cycle. So vast majority of our grantees only receive one grant. There's a big drop off between those applying for the second grants, and we're trying to look into why that might be. But if you have had multiple grants, you will see the other ones kind of listed on the side of the page. So I've put up Ransford's page here. So the Scaling Up Hippo Conservation in Ghana one. He's recently received the completion grant, but you can see on his page the other ones that have led up to this as well. And that's quite nice because you can see the progression through the work about what he's done. And we're also doing some showcases for people as well. Just give a bit of insight as to how individuals got to where they are today. You know what their motivation was, what drove them to do what they are doing. So Ganesh was one of our most recent showcases. Of course, it's got a cat. I'm a bit cat obsessed. Now, it might be that you are unsuccessful, and chances are you will be. Most funding applications are unsuccessful, unfortunately. That's, across all funders. And at the moment, Rufford Small Grant actually has a really, really high success rate. So we're about 24%, which is unusual. So try not to take it personally if you're unsuccessful. A no just means try again in the future. But what I would encourage you to do is act on any feedback that's been provided. So where possible, we are providing feedback on why the application was unsuccessful. Perhaps you didn't include enough information on a particular aspect. Perhaps we were worried about your methods, for example. If you apply again, I will look back to see any rejected applications and look to the reasons why, and also look to see what feedback was given to you. If I see that that's not been acted upon in the subsequent application, it will make me sad. So definitely take that feedback on board and use it in any subsequent applications. And it might be you go elsewhere to apply. That's absolutely fine. Of course it is. But, take that feedback on board because it will be relevant for that as well. And then, as I said at the beginning, if you yourself are ineligible, then definitely consider team members or students you might be working with, either now or in the future, who would be eligible, and support them in applying as well. So just to finish off, one of the other aspects of our small grant programme is we host learning events in different countries every year. So these bring together Rufford grantees to give them the opportunity to network, so meet other people working within their country. We'll sort of identify skills that need improving on. It's just a really good opportunity to spend 3 or 4 days together. Excuse me. Sorry, that was my boss. Um, Great opportunity for them to come together, learn from everyone's experience, and address some knowledge gaps as well. So in the future, you might get invited to one of these. I was just saying to Jodie, we have one coming up in Cameroon, one coming up in Madagascar, etc. And each one is quite unique because they are tailored to that particular cohort. So again, you can have a look on our website to see the reports from the learning events, which are really, really good and are getting lots of positive feedback from the participants. Okay, so that is everything I was going to say to you, but obviously I'm happy to answer any questions. So please feel free to either shout or pop something in the chat.
Thank you very much, Joe. It's such a lovely, such a lovely presentation, and so yeah, friendly and super helpful. I think, yeah, I've definitely learnt a lot about the grants through this. Do we have any questions either in that if you want to put in the chat, I can read for you, or that you can ask yourself in person? Does anyone? Maybe people want to think about it. But yeah, so I was thinking, like you said, so about the different they may not everyone might not be a student or
Mhm.
yeah, so what are the criteria for people who are not students, like in terms of age or experience or yeah, what would be your advice around that?
So I think that age isn't necessarily an issue in itself because we appreciate that sometimes people change career and they might have done that, perhaps they're in banking for example, and then they saw the light and decided no, I want to do conservation work. So age in itself isn't necessarily a problem. However, we wouldn't be able to support someone that's got quite an extensive record of work within the conservation sector already. So 5 years experience would be fine. If you've already worked within a national park for 10 years, for example, then no, we'd probably conclude that actually you're probably no longer early career. And it's that definition, the early career, which we kind of focus on and is kind of hard to define because we like to consider each one on a case by case basis. So that's a really terrible answer for you.
No, it's great. No, I think it's given a rough, like, yeah, like kind of 5 years. That's exactly kind of what I was wondering. So if someone's a bit older and they've just come to ecology, like maybe in the last few years, but not technically in the kind of the academic early career researcher like bracket, that's really good. So they could have a PhD in physics, but actually they're still not an early career conservation So
Yeah,
that's really useful. Thank you. Yeah, Catherine has a question in the chat. I will read them out for you, Catherine, because I'm so.
yeah. I was just having a quick
Oh,
look at
okay, cool,
that.
perfect. Okay, cool. Yeah, so good, Joe, if you want to answer those. And anybody else, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat or feel free to put your hand up and ask.
Yeah, so Catherine, just to how people can support those that are eligible to apply. Firstly, obviously, just making them aware of the Rufford Foundation and our programme, but also helping them perhaps put those applications together. The better quality application we see in that very first go, the quicker the process tends to be in actually sort of reviewing it. I should have touched on, I need to add an extra slide on this, which I will do in the future, the use of AI, because I mean, this is questions in pretty much every meeting I go to right now. And we know that a lot of people are writing the applications in English because we do only accept in English, and that might not be their first language. And so they will use AI to translate, and that's absolutely fine. If it is evident that the whole thing has been written by AI, though, we then become concerned that actually, is this person truly capable of doing what they're, intending to do? Do they actually know what they're talking about, for example? So this is something, again, we're having to look at quite carefully. So if you've actually got someone supporting you in doing that application, making sure you've got the right information in there, then that's fine. The English doesn't have to be polished at all. As long as we can understand the points that you're making, that's fine. So I don't want people to be put off by thinking, oh, this doesn't sound, good enough or scientific enough. It's better to hear you authentically rather than, just generating it by AI instead. Um, then Catherine's second question, can I confirm there are no deadlines and applications are welcome all year round? That is correct. Yeah, absolutely. We have no deadlines. I was saying to Jodie earlier that the applications come through at a fairly steady rate. Bizarrely enough, in the past sort of few weeks, there's been a bit of a flurry for the booster and completion applications. And I don't know if that's because people have had downtime from like their other work or whatever over Christmas and they've taken that opportunity to suddenly do some applications or something. But yeah, anytime, and we will just review them as quickly as we can. Okay, so just a question about work experience at Rufford Foundation offices. Unfortunately, that's not an option currently. But I will see, if anything has been done in the past and whether that's something we can look at in the future. I suspect it wouldn't be though, primarily because we're only in the office twice a week, if that, thanks to hybrid working.
There's another question in the chat. Thank you. That's excellent. All the questions are coming thick and fast now. I love
Yeah, so
it.
Vicky, projects from French, Portuguese, or Spanish overseas territories. Yes, we are absolutely considering those too. Again, because I think they're facing the same challenges that UCOTS are. I think UCOTS might be facing sort of harder challenges because of lack of access to EU funding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. So it might be trickier for those. But yeah, it's definitely something we are discussing. Um, oh, lovely, Nancy, you're welcome. Oh, and good. I'm glad you've heard about us now, Rachel. That's awesome.
Yeah, brilliant. So please do, if you have any other questions, put them in the chat. But I was wondering, so just to be clear, so you'll have early career conservationists in the overseas territories that can apply, and so from all over. So we've got Pitcairn, we've got the Mid Atlantic, we've got yeah, people from all over. So that would be really good. So everyone is eligible to apply, but I think you have a particular interest in the Caribbean, but everyone is welcome
Oh,
to be
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
fantastic. But you also have people in the UK, for example. So, for example, the University of Exeter does a lot in the UK overseas territories. Would a student in the UK who's researching with overseas territories also be eligible for these grants?
Yeah, so if it's a student in the UK, that's fine. It does go a little bit by nationality. So if, for example, they were a UK national, but they were applying to work in one of the overseas territories, for example, ideally we would like it to be someone from the overseas territory and based there and living there. However, it might be, a good opportunity for them to sort of buddy up with a student from there, for example, or something, just to get that initial sort of process going. We would look absolutely for capacity building if it was a case of a UK student going out to work there, to make sure that actually the knowledge, the skills, etc., remain there, and just try and avoid sort of any, I don't know, conservation tourism happening, if you like. So harder for a UK national to actually secure the funding, but we do consider it, and it does happen sometimes if the case is strong enough.
Okay, thank you. That's really useful. Does anybody else have any questions from the group? No? Okay, I think then, yeah, it's just left then for me to say like a huge thank you, Joe. That was just such a really fantastic presentation. We'll be sharing this, of course, after the Nancy, do you have a question?
No, I'm just coming on the
Oh,
goodbyes to say thank
okay,
you.
perfect.
It was
Yeah,
very
but yeah,
interesting. Just thought I'd show my face
Good.
again. And
thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. 5 overseas territories and a crown dependency. That's pretty good going, I think, for only 9 people. So that's excellent. Well done.
Awesome. And I would just like to say you've got my email address there for everyone. So if you've got further questions or if you just wanted to run an idea by me before you go through that onerous process of making the application, I'm happy to do so. As long as you don't all inundate me with like 60 requests, that would be fine.
Thank you, Joe. That's awesome. And what I'll be doing, I'll be emailing all the attendees afterwards just to check they're happy to share their details with Joe after the meeting
Mhm.
as well, just so that she can follow up with you. But yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for taking the time, Joe. And yeah, have a great
You're welcome.
your day. And thank you. Take
thank
care.
you. Thanks a lot.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.